Hey guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Samantha Leighanne and I talk about books. So welcome to my December wrap up. I had a really good reading month, and really I just had a really good reading year. I'm kind of surprised that it was as good as it was, considering it was December and I work retail and things are usually pretty crazy. So I'm pretty pleased with the way that the month turned out. I did do vlog style this month, so let me give you the breakdown real quick of all of the books that I read in December. I read a total of 16 books, which came out to be 4,202 pages. The star breakdown on that is I read 2 5-star books, 5 4-star books, 8 3-star books, and no 2 or 1 stars. So I would say that's a pretty solid month. Breakdown as far as format, I only did 3 audiobooks this month. I did 2 ebooks, and then I ended up reading 11 physical books, which I don't usually read that many physical books in a month. So I am pretty proud of myself as far as that goes. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the wrap up. Hey guys, so I have finished a couple books. So wanted to go ahead and talk about them. So today is December 4th, and I have finished 3 books so far. First book that I finished was Anne Boleyn, A King's Obsession. This is by Alison Weir. Most of you guys know that I am total trash for historical fiction, especially anything about Anne Boleyn. Well, I've come to the conclusion that for the most part, I feel like I have most necessary information about Anne Boleyn. So nothing in this novel was new to me. If you are unfamiliar with Alison Weir, she actually does a lot of nonfiction, which I have read some of her nonfiction about Anne Boleyn. And so there was a lot of carryover from that into this book as well. Again, I didn't get any new information. The one thing that I did like about this book versus some other books about this particular historical figure is that more often than not, whenever you look at the way that Anne Boleyn is portrayed, she is portrayed as this conniving person who only wanted to be queen because of reasons, and you know, they just kind of make her out to be more or less the villain as opposed to Catherine of Aragon. Yes, Darren. That was one thing that Weir didn't really do a lot of. She was portrayed in a little bit of a different light than she usually is, and so I did appreciate that aspect of it, but overall the book was just okay. It wasn't anything spectacular. This is part of a series where she's doing a fictional book on one of each of the wives of Henry VIII. I have already read the first one, obviously Catherine of Aragon, and I did enjoy that one a little bit more than I enjoyed this one, but the other 4 wives are not really written about all that much. So I'm really interested to see what she does with the rest of the series. So I gave this one 3 stars. You know, it's definitely not a must read, but it was okay. So the second book that I finished is Sing Unburied Sing. This is by Jesmyn Ward, and I gave this one 3 stars. Well, first of all, I do own the physical copy, but I did check out the audiobook from the library. And so I half read this and half listened to it, which is why I got it done so quickly. Not that it's a really long book to begin with, it is under 300 pages. But I gave it 3 stars, and I did really enjoy the writing style. I think this won the National Book Award this year, but I'm not sure. I enjoyed parts of the character development. There were a couple other things about it that I wasn't as big of a fan of. The way that the narrative was set up, there were a couple times where I was like, wait a minute, what the hell is happening right now? Like, I didn't really understand where we were. And I felt like some of the connections could have been made a little bit more strongly. Overall, it was a good book. I gave it 3.5 stars. It wasn't quite 4 stars. There's definitely some heavy emotion that's involved in this book, but I definitely did like it. It just wasn't quite like 5 stars. So, and the last book that I'm going to talk about this time is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I really liked this. I liked this a lot more than I was expecting to like it, to be completely honest. A lot of people have talked about this book. A lot of people have really loved it. I've seen it all over BookTube, especially with the duology that she came out which is set in the same universe. And I got this last year for Christmas, so I guess now it's a good time to read it since we're coming up on a year since I've had it. I was looking on my shelf and this caught my attention, so I grabbed it, and I'm really glad that I did. And I actually want to immediately dive into the next book, which I think is Siege and Storm, because I've been kind of like craving fantasy. And yes, I had been reading A Song of Ice and Fire, but that is a much different fantasy than this, because this is young adult. Some of it is a little tropey, like, you know, you have the the main character who is weak and has been weak her whole life, and now all of a sudden like she has something to hold on to, and you know, that kind of thing. But overall I really enjoyed it, and so I ended up giving it 4 stars. So I'm interested to see where the rest of the story goes. Also, the Darkling is an ass. So that's all I have for you guys this time, and I will see you in the next section. I finished 2 more books that I wanted to go ahead and talk about. The first one is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and I gave this one 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. Plot is a little bit difficult to explain, but it takes place in Russia, and if I had to guess, like the 1800s. I don't know. I don't think that there's ever really like a specific time. But it deals a lot with Russian mythology and superstition and things like that. So you have your main character, Vasya, who is a woman unlike any other in her little village, because she thinks for herself, she does for herself, and she keeps the old ways, which her mother did. And so her mother actually died in childbirth, and when her stepmother comes in who does things completely differently, it kind of brings in its whole other set of problems, you know, and so it kind of takes you through what happened, you know, within their family. And I really, really enjoyed this because the Russian mythology was so interesting to me. I found myself captivated by the writing. The story itself was really magical. There were a lot of fantastic elements, and so I really enjoyed that. I found myself just totally enthralled with the story, and this is actually the first in a series. I don't know how many there are, but I do know that the second book, The Girl in the Tower, just came out, so I have plans to read that because I really enjoyed this. So 4 stars. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And the second book that I'm going to talk about is The Last Queen by C.W. Gortner. This is an author that is new to me, but you guys know that I love historical fiction. I have a whole shelf of it, and this is one that I hadn't read, so I just picked it up, grabbed it. This is a story about Juana of Castile, who, if you are familiar with history at all, she is the daughter of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, and the sister to Catherine of Aragon, who married Henry VIII. That was his first wife. So historically, she married the Archduke Philip, who was the heir to the Habsburg Empire, and she is referred to as Juana the Mad because of subsequent things that happened. So I was really interested to read this because this is a figure in history that I knew little to nothing about. And I was also really interested because, you know, in history they talk about that she went a little crazy. I really enjoyed the way that she was portrayed. I really enjoyed the fact that she was portrayed as, you know, like a strong woman and that sort of. And I also like the fact that this kind of showed her as being not as crazy as everybody said that she was. So, but I really enjoyed it, and I think that I would definitely pick up more by this author. I gave it like 3.5 stars because it wasn't quite 4 stars. If you're a fan of historical fiction, I would probably say, you know, definitely pick up one of his books. But the writing was good. I enjoyed the story, so, you know, 3.5 stars. And those are the only 2 books that I have right now, so I'll see y'all in the next section. Hey guys, quick update. I am on my lunch break, but while I was on my lunch break, I managed to finish Siege and Storm. This is book 2 of the Grisha-verse trilogy thing by Leigh Bardugo. The first book in this series I did give a 4-star to. Took this one down to a 3. It definitely kind of suffered from like the sophomore slump type deal, and I'm not going to talk about plot or anything like that because obviously spoilers, is the second book in a series. A lot of stuff happened in this book that I just did not honestly care about. Like the very beginning was interesting, and then you had the middle where nothing really happened or nothing that interested me. Like it was character development, so like I guess in a way it was good, but the whole thing that is between Alina and Mal, I just could not give a shit less about. And I honestly could not give a shit less about Mal. And there's a lot of things that I want to say about Mal, but I can't really talk about any of it because it's all very spoilery. Just know that I am not a fan of like any of the men that are in this book right now. Like I just could not give a shit less about them. And you know, Mal is the one that we're supposed to like love in whatever, and I don't, so sorry. But yeah, I ended up taking this down to 3 stars. Like, I'm definitely still gonna finish the trilogy. I don't think it was terrible, but it just left something to be desired for me. But that's all I really have right now, so I will see you guys in the next section. Hey guys, I have another update, and I have 3 books to talk about this time. First one is a book that I listened to on audio, and it's The Confessions of Catherine de' Medici by C.W. Gortner. So this is my second by this author, and it was very much like the first one. She's a figure in history that I really wasn't very familiar with, and honestly, one of the only things that I knew about her was her as a character from the show Reign, which I think is on like the CW or whatever the hell that channel is called. But the 2 characters, you know, compared to the show and then compared to this, there's a very big contrast there. So you had a woman who, in my knowledge of her, who has been kind of portrayed as a, you know, like conniving and terrible woman. This book, she wasn't portrayed that way at all. And I did like the characterization, I liked the writing. The history seemed pretty accurate from what I knew, because as I started reading it, I started doing a little bit more research just so I was a little bit more familiar with the people and the time period and things like that. That's usually what I do whenever I'm reading historical fiction. And I ended up giving it 3 stars. Like, it wasn't the best book that I've ever read, but it wasn't bad if you like historical fiction. I will say that this one, like, we were only halfway through the book whenever she got through the earliest parts of her life, and I'm like, okay, you've had all of your children, like what is there left? But she was actually a woman who lived a long life, and so the back half of the book I did find to be more interesting than the front half. But I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was pretty good. Next book that I have to talk about is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This is a book that everybody made me think would be like life-changing, and everybody says it is always so wonderful. And I will be honest, I fully expected by the end of this to only give it 3 stars, but the ending of this book is very powerful. And so I ended up bumping it up to 4 stars, but I didn't find it as compelling as I thought it would be from the get-go. And so it took me a little bit to get into it. But the story is told from the perspective of death, and it seems like some people really like that, and then some people didn't. I, for one, thought that it was a nice touch. It's something that I've never seen done before, and also because of the time period that this book is taking place, I feel like it's very fitting. But the writing was very good, but again, like, I don't know, I just didn't connect with the story or the characters. Like, it took me a minute, but again, the ending was very powerful, so I did end up enjoying it and gave it 4 stars. And the third and final book that I'm going to talk about this time is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, and this is honestly exactly what it sounds like. It is fairly short. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It wasn't the best that I've ever read by him, but it definitely wasn't bad by any means. Personally, I am more familiar with Greek mythology than I am with Norse mythology, and so this was kind of a really good introduction to, you know, those myths. The lighting that I'm using right now is really terrible because I'm on my lunch break and it's like really cloudy outside and it's just terrible. But the cover on this is beautiful. I love it. So it was very simply written, and it kind of took you a little bit like through the background of several of the gods and like some of the more well-known stories, how Thor got his hammer, those kinds of things. So I did really enjoy it. I really liked the writing. I always loved Gaiman's writing style, so you know, that was ever present. It's a good short read if you're into mythology at all. I would definitely pick it up. Gave it 3 stars. And that is all I have for you guys in this section. And what is today? Today's the 18th, and I'm currently reading 2 different books, so I don't know. I may end up finishing like 4 more before the end of the year. We'll see. I don't know. But okay, see you guys in the next section. Hey guys, if I look really familiar, it's because I am in the middle of filming a couple other things, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about a couple of things that I read. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is The Winter Sea by Susanna Kearsley. And this is a kind of like half historical fiction, like half romance, that takes place in 2 different timelines. So you have Carrie McClelland, who is an author, and she is staying in Scotland to research this book that she's writing. And she has like this incredibly deep connection, you know, with the area, and this story is just coming to her better than it's ever come to her before. And you know, she meets people and stuff happens and there's a romance, and so that's all I'm gonna say about that aspect of it. I really liked the writing in this. This was a book that kind of snuck up on me because I wasn't like super into it whenever I first started. The writing was nice, the setting was nice, but I just wasn't really invested. And then once you got towards the middle, towards the end, and you know, like things really started happening to these characters, you know, you had to stop and it kind of snuck up on you. And so I did really enjoy that. This is an author that I read at the recommendation of Bree Hill, who I absolutely adore. Link her channel down below. I didn't like fall in love with this author just based on this book, but she has written a bunch of other things and I do own several of her other books, so I plan on still reading more. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It wasn't like the best book that I've ever read, but I really liked the writing and I want to see what else this author can do. So the next 2 things that I read, and I can't remember if I talked about issue 5 of Skin and Earth, but I did read that earlier this month, and issue 6 came in, which is the final issue, and I read that and I loved it. I really liked how she wrapped everything up. She says that the series is finished, but I kind of hope it's not, because I still feel like there's somewhere she can go with Anaya and, you know, this entire world that she's created. So I am really interested to see if she decides to do anything else with it. Regardless, I really liked the series. I loved the tie-in with the music. If you haven't listened to the album Skin and Earth by Lights, I highly encourage you to do so. It is very poppy, it is electronic, but it is excellent. I love it. It's not usually the kind of stuff that I listen to, but I love her music so much. So if that sounds like something that even might remotely interest you, I would definitely do that. So the next book that I'm going to talk about is Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This is book 3 in the Grisha trilogy, Grishaverse, whatever it's called now. This book was so much better than book 2. It was so much better. I really liked this book for a multitude of different reasons. During book 2, I could not have given less of a shit about Mal. Like, I just thought that he was a giant asshole. And he kind of redeemed himself within this book. There was a little bit less of a focus on their relationship. It was much more interesting, much more fast-paced than the second book was, and I enjoyed that. Of course, this is the ending to the trilogy, so all of the things happen. There were a couple of things that were kind of left as loose ends that she didn't really address. Anytime you have loose ends, it's like, wait a minute, what about this? Like, why is this not relevant? Like, how can they live happily ever after when, like, this is a factor? Not that they live happily ever after, like, let me be clear. It does tie things in this nice little bow, which was okay. I could have seen it having an alternative ending. I'm not gonna say I wish it had an alternative ending, but I don't know. I see other directions that it could have gone to make it a little bit more interesting, but also, like, this is YA, and I feel like the series as a whole maybe could have gone into a little bit of a different direction had she maybe gone like the new adult route instead of YA. It was still a good series. If you were thinking about reading the series and you haven't, I would read it. The progression was 4 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars for books 1, 2, and 3, and I plan on doing kind of like a whole series review after the first of the year, once I get through all like the wrap up videos and that kind of stuff, because there's like 8 million of those that I need to film. So yeah, 4 stars. I liked it. I liked the series. It was good. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is I realized that on Hoopla, there are the Wicked and the Divine volumes, but I read volume 2 of the Wicked and the Divine, and once again, the art style is beautiful. It's definitely my favorite thing about this entire series. But what you're dealing with is like demigods, and apparently, you know, every so many years they show their faces and they only live for 2 years. And the first volume I gave 4 stars because it kind of like threw you in and you're like, not everything has been explained, so I'm a little bit confused, but like I can run with it. This volume, I was even more confused than the first for a multitude of reasons. Like, I feel like we're just getting new information, but nothing is really being pulled together and nothing is really being fully explained. And so I'm a little bit lost. I still want to continue reading it because I want to see like how everything wraps up. I need for them to be just a little bit more clear. And so for that reason, I ended up giving this particular volume 3 stars. But like I said, I'm still going to keep reading it because the art style is just so beautiful. I love it. But okay, so I will see you guys in the next section. Hello, welcome. You made it this far. So I still have 2 books that I need to talk about because I read these like at the very, very end of the month, and I was kind of trying to like, I don't want to say rush them in, but they happened like within the last couple of days of the month. So I didn't have a chance to like actually vlog those. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a new to me author, and I absolutely loved this book. This was one of my 2 5-star picks of the month. So basic synopsis of this book. This is told in 2 different perspectives. We have one of our characters, Monique. She is a journalist. She is going through a divorce and is just kind of like floating along in her career. She isn't doing anything great, but she's working for a really great publication. And she is chosen by one of the most amazing actresses of her time, Evelyn Hugo, to do a piece on her and like something that she's doing for charity. So she's so excited, has no idea why she's been chosen, goes to meet Evelyn Hugo. Turns out things aren't exactly what they seem, and things kind of go from there. I won't say much more than that. I do plan on doing a full review for this because I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much. There's a lot of commentary in terms of, feminism and women's roles and things of that nature, which I really enjoyed. The relationships between characters are really the thing that drives this book the most. I was not expecting to be so enthralled in these relationships as I was. And there is a piece where everything kind of wraps up together. And I pride myself in usually being able to figure those out pretty quickly. I didn't see this one coming because I was so enthralled with everything. And I'm pretty much just repeating everything that I said from my best of 2017 video, because this is one of the best books that I read this year. So if you want to see just a little bit more about it, I will link that up above for you to watch. And like I said, I am going to be doing a full review on this and a discussion as well, just because I have so many things that I want to say about it. But it is absolutely excellent. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. If you're kind of on the fence about it, read this book. And the very last book that I read was a good one. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and it is The City of Brass. I am not going to attempt to pronounce the author's name because I will butcher it, and I know this. But I'll actually read the synopsis for this one just because there's so much to explain within this book, so I'm just going to read the synopsis real quick so you can kind of see what it's about. Nari has never believed in magic. Certainly she has power. On the streets of 18th century Cairo, she's a con woman of unsurpassed talent, but she knows better than anyone that the trade she uses to get by, palm reading, czars, and mysterious gifts for healing, are all tricks, both the means to the delightful end of swindling Ottoman nobles and a reliable way to survive. But when Nari accidentally summons Dara, an equally sly, darkly mysterious Jinn warrior, to her side during one of her cons, she's forced to reconsider her beliefs. For Dara tells Nari an extraordinary tale across hot, wind-swept sands, teeming with creatures of fire and rivers where mythical creatures sleep, past ruins of once magnificent human metropolises, and mountains where the circling birds of prey are more than what they seem, lies Daevabad, a legendary city of brass, a city to which Nari is bound. This is a debut author, and this is one hell of a debut book. It's pretty chunky. However, I really felt like it went really quickly. I really loved the characters. I loved the mythology. I loved the world building. I loved pretty much most things about this book. The only thing that I felt suffered just a little bit was the pacing. And I got to the end of this book and I was like, that can't be it. There has to be more. It turns out that this is book 1 of a trilogy, so I'll definitely be picking up the other books in the trilogy once they are published, but I really, really enjoyed this book. Like I said, the pacing is a little bit off, but again, this is a debut author, and if her debut is this strong, I can't wait to see what else she does with the rest of the series. The settings are beautiful. I was so into the culture of this. I loved it so much, everything about it. I was really into the world that we were thrown in, and it kind of alternates between the 18th century human world and Daevabad, which is, this magical place. And there was like this element of a love triangle that was kind of happening, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first, but given the way that the book ended, like I can see it. I really want to see where it goes. I have seen a couple of people hyping this book, and I am here to hype it. Read it. It is excellent. I loved it. I didn't quite give it 5 stars just because of a little bit of issue that I had as far as the pacing went. But other than that, I really, really loved it. So you should definitely read this book. So that's it. Those were the 16 books that I read in the month of December. Like I said, 16 books was a little bit more than I was expecting to read, so I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But have you read any of the books that I mentioned here today? If you have, comment down below. Let me know what were your favorites of the month, what were not your favorites. If you posted your December wrap-up, which I feel like most people have, I'm kind of late to the game. Link it down below so that I can watch it and get caught up on everything. As always, if you like what you see and you want to see more, make sure you give it a big thumbs up and hit subscribe if you have not already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.